Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 26, Text 15. All these are considered the qualified Brahman. The mixing element, which is known as time, is counted as the 25th element. Purport. According to the Vedic version, there is no existence beyond Brahman. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. It is stated also in the Vishnu Purana that whatever we see is Parasya Brahmana Shakti. Everything is the expansion of the energy of the Supreme Absolute Truth, Brahman. When Brahman is mixed with the three qualities, goodness, passion, and ignorance, there results the material expansion, which is sometimes called Sagun Brahman, and which consists of these 25 elements. In the Nirgun Brahman, where there is no material contamination, or in the spiritual world, the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are not present. Where Nirgun Brahman is found, simple unalloyed goodness prevails. Sagun Brahman is described by the Sankhya system of philosophy as consisting of 25 elements, including the time factor, past, present, and future. Etavan eva sankyato brahmana sagunasyaha sannivesho maya prokto yokala panchavimshaka. All these are considered the qualified Brahman. The mixing element, which is known as time, is counted as the 25th element. So time is understood to be the element which mixes the different ingredients within the material nature. Everything mixes due to the factor of time. Everything takes place at a certain period of time. It is not that things happen automatically, but rather they happen in a specific sequence, according to the plan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, that plan may also be modified, or not really modified, but derived according to the karma and desires of the living entities. But that is also part of the plan of the Supreme Lord. For instance, I may create some kind of a program on a computer where you can put in whatever numbers you want and get out a certain result. Now, the program within which you work is already written, but you have the freedom to put in different kinds of numbers, and therefore you get different kinds of results. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead has already created the program of this material world. And we may place into it various factors of action, various activities or actions which we have decided to perform. And because we have put in certain types of activities, we get out certain types of reactions. And the Supreme Lord, He is always allowing this to take place according to that which will be required to fulfill the karma of the living entities. So the program is already written. It is a question of deriving the results. As you sow, so shall you reap. Whatever seeds you place in the ground, those particular plants come out. Whatever particular activities you perform, so the reactions will take place. And once these reactions have taken place, then one must deal with them as well, and new reactions will then be created. All of this is strictly under the control of the time factor. According to the time factor, at one point in time one is given a certain set of circumstances, and according to the set of circumstances he has to make choices, decisions, and movements, actions. Then according to the time factor, those movements or actions will fructify, and they will create reactions in the future which one must enjoy or suffer. Now, of course, some persons think that by simply not acting, they'll be able to avoid reactions. But that may put off the situation for some time. But ultimately, one must also act. So long as you're in the material world, you're bound up in the cycle of action and reaction. But when one becomes actually freed from that cycle of action and reaction, then he will be freed from all of this. He will not be bound up to create some action which will create reaction, and neither will he have to suffer reactions. So when one is in the bound-up situation, where he's forced to make decisions at a certain point due to Brahman, time factor, and he's forced to accept reactions at certain points due to the time factor, this is called the situation Saguna Brahman. The Brahman, which is everywhere, all-pervasive, which has accepted the three qualities of the material nature under the direction of the Lord for the satisfaction of the living entity's desires. And when one is acting in the liberated state, freed from all such disturbing conditions of the interaction from the three modes of nature, that is called Nirguna Brahman, or Brahman which does not have the influence of the three modes of material nature, the gunas. The Mayavadis say Nirguna means freed from all qualities and characteristics. But this is not the only definition of the word guna, quality, characteristic. It also refers to the three modes of material nature. In this particular instance, it obviously refers to the three modes of material nature, because were it to refer simply to qualities and characteristics, we would be faced with the contradiction that in the material world qualities exist, but in the spiritual world there are no qualities. So then one would ask, from where has the material world come? If it has come from the spiritual world, then the spiritual world must have more qualities than the material world. And in order that it may have supplied these qualities here in the material world, the spiritual world must have had more. Actually, Krishna is called the reservoir of all ingredients, because all ingredients that may be found within the entire creation are found within Krishna. And he, therefore, may supply all those ingredients throughout the material world for the satisfaction of the living entities and for fulfilling their desires. So, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has given us this facility because He's got so many qualities. He can give so much to us. But if Brahman is the Supreme and Brahman has no qualities, not even in potential. Remember now, when they speak in terms of Brahman, they don't speak in terms of potential energy. They don't speak in terms of something which is already there. They speak simply in terms of a oneness which is undifferentiated in any regard. An undifferentiated oneness can never produce anything. This is due to their complete misunderstanding of the philosophy of the Veda. Undifferentiated oneness cannot possibly account for creation at any point in time. Therefore, they try to get around this by saying there is no creation at any point in time. This is all illusion. It doesn't exist. Therefore, if it doesn't exist, there's no question of it being created. And if it is not existing and not created, therefore the Brahman does not have to have those qualities to account for its existence, because it doesn't exist. And in this way, the merry-go-round of the Mayavadi philosophy just goes on with the horses bobbing up and down and the music playing, without any understanding whatsoever of the Vedic conclusion. Vedaischa savairaham eva veja, Krishna. You can go on speculating with all kinds of marvelous philosophy and philosophical terminology, but the basic point that can never be overruled is that there is a Supreme Personality of Godhead who is the source of all emanations of energy. And that Supreme Lord, who is the source of all emanations of energy, is independent, is able to do what He likes, when He likes, and manifest whatever He likes, whenever He likes. So, the concepts which are given here in this chapter, with all of the detailed creation of all of the sense objects and other of the 24 elements which are mentioned here, of which time is the 25th. These factors are simply meant for preparing us to accept the supremacy of Krishna, preparing us to understand His supreme control, and preparing us to understand His desires. Because once you understand Krishna's greatness, then you can understand how His desires are something which we should follow. When you understand a person's quality, then you get the desire to listen, hear, understand, accept, and change the direction of what you're doing to make it in the mold of that superior personality. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada was so able to capture our minds and intelligence because we were convinced of His great position. Because of Him being able to say things to us which changed our hearts. Of course, not everybody understood like that. There were even some of His own disciples who didn't understand like that. And certainly there were others in this world who didn't understand like that. No need to go into this. But we understood because we saw He is giving us something which we did not have before, which we could not have gotten otherwise. He's bringing us Krishna consciousness, and He is teaching us Krishna conscious philosophy, of which we had no entrance, within which we had no entrance before. And that whole process and philosophy is giving us a new lease on life, allowing us to understand more clearly what is our position, understand for the first time, and serve Krishna and get reciprocation from Krishna. After all, our whole Krishna consciousness movement is based on reciprocation. Just like Prabhupada once made us understand, that in fact we're in this Krishna consciousness movement because we're getting a reciprocation of loving exchange with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and also the Spiritual Master, when we please them with our loving devotion. They reciprocate with love and realization and renunciation. And in this way, we are able to be very nicely engaged in increasing our activities of serving Krishna. So because there's a reciprocation there, we feel the reciprocation. We feel that love which is coming from the Lord, coming from His representative. For after all, you cannot approach Krishna directly. You must do so through the agency of the Spiritual Master. That is why whenever you're performing various forms of deity worship, the first thing one does is he must offer the articles to the Spiritual Master. And the Spiritual Master then is the one who is offering the articles to Krishna. But we simply act as the physical agency to assist him in that activity. Then we may offer to the deities one after another. We, in our particular form of deity worship, there was a very big discussion about this in Mayapur, which was very interesting. According to the Hari Bhakti Vilas strict interpretation of the Hari Bhakti Vilas, which did not take into account something else which is also in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, the worship would be that you take permission of the Spiritual Master and worship Krishna directly and then give the prasadam of Krishna to all of the different personalities who were being worshipped on the altar. Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very much worshipping the prasadam of Radha and Krishna. So you would offer something to Radha and Krishna, first to Krishna, then to Srimati Radharani, and the prasadam would be passed down. So this also is correct. However, the more correct thing is that first we offer to the spiritual master, who offers to his spiritual master, who offers to his spiritual master, because no spiritual master would think himself independently capable of worshipping Krishna. Because first you offer to your spiritual master, then he will offer to Krishna. But your spiritual master also thinks that first I must offer to my spiritual master, and then he will offer to Krishna. So therefore the article is placed in the hands of our spiritual master, who passes it down. It's not that he's passing it along, he's giving it to his spiritual master, saying, you please offer, but his spiritual master is giving it to his and saying, you please offer. And so thus we bring it all the way back up to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is in fact the founding acharya of the Krishna consciousness, a movement in the sense, not ISKCON, but in the sense of Krishna consciousness as it appears in Kali Yuga. Of course, you could make a case for bringing it back from Madhavendra Puri. That's another point. But on our altar, we worship up to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, the article will go up to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Yeah. And then again, the pujari, on behalf, and he will offer to Krishna. But then on behalf of the parampara, the pujari, after having offered it up, will then start with Krishna on behalf of the parampara, and then come back down again and worship all the other personalities with the prasadam of Krishna. While it is going up, it is not prasadam, because nobody's accepting it. They're just passing it. And then we start again, as Lord Chaitanya would offer to Krishna, and then it comes back down again. So these points of the intricacies of the worship display the reciprocation which is very much evident in our Vaishnava Sampradaya. The reciprocation where we are directly reciprocating with spiritual master and the entire parampara. And that reciprocation manifests in the ability to offer to Krishna, who will reciprocate with us in delivering the prasadam of the offering back to us in the form of either foodstuff, prasadam foodstuff, or prasadam flowers, or prasadam mercy. Because prasadam means basically that which comes from the Supreme Lord for the usage of His devotees in either of these three aspects or some other aspect. Basically it means mercy. That we are getting mercy from the Lord. But it is not that the Lord, especially Krishna, is just causelessly giving out His mercy. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has done that. But Krishna does not do like that. Krishna does that in reciprocation, when we become qualified. That reciprocation must be there. Then the Lord will give us, in reciprocating love. Therefore He says, Ye yata mam prapajante, tam tataiva bhajamya. I reciprocate with them according to the way in which they are worshipping me. Therefore, in the Pancharachiki system, the concept of offering to Krishna and receiving Krishna's mercy in this way is very much stressed. But in the Bhagavata Vidhi, because we have two paths simultaneously, the process of worshipping the Bhagavata, meaning Bhagavatam and Bhagavata, that personality who represents Bhagavatam, or represents the Bhagavatas, that personality who actually represents Krishna, worshipping them. Then there's another reciprocation there. Now the reciprocation is the same in both, because after all, if you worship Bhagavata, he brings the worship to Krishna. If you worship Krishna in the altar, but you do it through the Bhagavatas. So, in both senses, it's exactly the same. Except in the Pancharachiki Vidhi, what is most obvious is the Supreme Lord, in the sense of the deity form. In the Bhagavata Vidhi, which is most obvious is the mission coming through the spiritual master. Of the two, Bhagavata Vidhi is far more important than Pancharachaki Vidhi. However, the Pancharachaki Vidhi is essential, otherwise everybody will fall down. Because very few can keep the image of exactly what they're doing in difficult circumstances simply by engaging in the Bhagavata Vidhi. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada, following the advice of Jiva Goswami, carefully established both tracks simultaneously so that we may understand everything without difficulty. Although previously, in the Vaishnava Sampradayas, before Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada re-established the social aspects of organization under the instructions of his father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. When he re-established temples with worship, with giving Brahmin threads, even before this there were no Brahmin threads being given, because Vaishnava does not require even Diksha or Brahmin thread. It was simply the straight Bhagavata Vidhi coming from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, just simply worshipping the Lord by chanting the holy name and preaching. But this had become weakened because there were very few persons capable of pure Bhagavata Vidhi. Therefore, the Pancharachaki Vidhi had to be re-established. Therefore, he started giving Brahmana threads again. Therefore, he started then chanting certain mantras and worshipping the deity in the temple. Our present deity worship handbook, which is very limited, was a summary of the worship which is in the Hari Bhakti Vilas. Presently, coming very soon now, is a very sophisticated version of this, which gives in three categories: the easy way, the intermediate way, and the elaborate form of worship, straight out of the book. But this was established during the time of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. Formerly to him you did not have, in a social context, the Bhagavata Vidhi and the Pancharachaki Vidhi side by side existing. This was brought to us by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. However, in course of time, the Bhagavata part of it became diminished. And this led to the dissolution of the preaching mission of the Gaudiya Math. Prabhupada re-established that very strongly, saying that this is the most important thing. But he did not neglect the Pancharachaki Vidhi because he perfectly re-established the principles of his spiritual master. But he did so in a way in which everybody understood what the real point was. Like he once said in One Morning Walk in 73, if you don't go on preaching, there'll be no more of this Hari Hari Bol. Because you may have very nice temples and they may be organized very perfectly according to all kinds of principles, which may or may not be according to Shastra, but at least there are some principles. And you may forget everything about the preaching mission, how it should go on, how it should be organized, and what is the actual life of the preaching mission. Bhagavata Vidhi can be very easily pushed aside, especially when people are more or less interested in their own personal situations. Therefore, there has been some hesitation to accept Varnashram from many quarters, which we also personally understand. Why? Because it gives a license by which somebody can ooze off into a situation whereby he's more concerned with his own existence, especially household existence, and not terribly too much concerned with the preaching mission. But that doesn't necessarily have to be so. It is not so that it must be like that. That is a contaminated form of Varnashram. Because the real form of Varnashram will obviously take as its overriding organizational factor the Bhagavata Vidhi within the context of Pancharachaki Vidhi. Or Pancharachaki Vidhi within the context of Bhagavata Vidhi. It's just simply a different way to look at it. But the point is that without the Bhagavata-vidhi, without the path of following in the footsteps of those who are preaching the mission of Krishna consciousness under the order of their spiritual master, you will never have success in either path. One will never have success in spiritual life. Therefore, one must understand the balance between the two. The balance between the two. And it is within this that we understand reciprocation in different ways. We understand the reciprocation with the deities, no doubt,